Happy video day, guys. So for today's video, we are doing another Make Up Your Mind. And today's Make Up Your Mind, you guys have been tagging me since the moment that this palette was announced. And I was waiting. I was giving it a little bit more time because I wanted to kind of like get some better swatches of this palette before I went ahead and started looking for it. And finally, I think Pat McGrath has released enough information for me to be able to do my Make Up Your Mind. So that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be a Make Up Your Mind on the new Pat McGrath Divine Rose 2. If you guys haven't seen this release yet, it is Pat McGrath's brand new Mothership palette. It is basically a sister to the Divine Rose that released not that long ago. And this is the second version of it. And to me, it just basically looks like a deeper version of the Divine Rose. Like the Divine Rose is the airy, more ethereal looking one, and then this one is a little bit more vampy. However, I do think the color scheme looks kind of similar. And if you guys don't know, this palette is going to be retailing for $125 US, and I believe it's releasing around May 29th. Around there. But what we do in this video is, this is when I sit down, I look through my palettes and I try to find similar colors in my collection to swatch them on my arm and get an idea if this palette is worth it for me to pick up. So I do this with every single brand new release palette. You guys know this by now because I really just want to know, do I have similar tones in my collection? And also, is this a color story that I tend to use? And this has worked really good for me lately. I really have been able to kind of like grasp what are the colors that I usually put on my lids, what are the colors I usually stay away from, and whether palettes that are releasing are things I'm gonna actually use. And when there's a price tag like $125 for a palette, it better be something that I use. I've got a few palettes to show you guys that I found these colors in, or at least things that are kind of similar. And well, I do feel like I was able to find most of the colors. So if you guys participated this week in my Insta challenge, I showed you guys a little tricky little photo of the Divine Rose 2, trying to trick you guys to see how many of you guys actually knew which palette it was that I was trying to find. And these are a few of the people that actually guessed it right. So congratulations to you guys. You guys, that was a really good eye on your part. I kind of picked some colors to make it tricky, and I do feel like you guys did a really good job. If you guys want the opportunity to be featured in my next Make Up Your Mind, don't forget to follow me over on Instagram at Christina Brooke Beauty, and just wait until I post the picture for next week's swatches. And if you guys guess correctly, I may feature you in my next video. So also, if you guys are new and you've never seen me before here on YouTube, my name is Christina Brooke, and I would love it if you'd want to hit the subscribe button so you guys can see more of these videos. I do Make Up Your Minds every single week. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. So here is the moment, and here are my results. I'm going to tell you guys that I feel like I was able to find similar colors to this palette in a few different palettes. I really was. Now, the difference with Pat McGrath that does make it a little unique is she has a very interesting formula. And I am somebody who owns Pat McGrath, one of the Mothership palettes, which I actually think is probably one of the most beautiful Mothership palettes. It's this one right here, the Bronze Seduction. So I am very aware of how unique some of her formulas are, especially like her Astral formula, which there is one or two inside of this palette. And it's very, very different. It really is. It's something different, okay? So I am not trying to mimic Pat McGrath's formula by looking at other palettes. I do think Pat McGrath has a very interesting, especially metallic and astral formula, but that's not to say that some of the palettes that I dived into I don't love too, because I really do. But I do want to see the color story, because if I'm going to buy this, it better be something that I'm going to wear. So that's what I'm trying to find out here. To get this color story, I did jump into a few palettes, more than I probably would have wanted to. But I really wanted to get them perfect, and I actually had less palettes and I added more in because I just found better colors in other palettes, and I was like, no, I'm adding you. So the first one is from Huda Beauty, and it's the Mauve Obsessions. I think I only pulled one color from here, but I needed that one color. The other one is the Natasha Denona Gold palette. I think I got two from this palette. I also jumped into the New Nude from Huda Beauty, which I will tell you has a pretty similar color story going on. It's not exact, but it has a similar idea. I did pick a few colors out of this palette right here from ABH and Carly Bible. And finally, the palette that I actually think has a very similar idea going, but all the colors are not in it, is the Lila from Natasha Denona. And finally, I actually jumped into the Mothership. I added the Mothership Bronze Seduction in here just to grab one tone to kind of like dab it on top. And when I did that, I noticed that some other colors had striking similarities to some of the colors inside of the palette, inside of the new palette. So I said, you know what, I'm just gonna use those tones because they just remind me too much. So that's what I ended up doing. Those are all the palette, but let's get into the swatches. So for the first color, I remember a similar tone inside of Carly Bible, and it's this color up here called Boy. Now, Boy is more of like a creamy opal shade, but it has a rose shift to it. When I looked at the Divine Rose, it kind of reminded me a lot of the tone inside of this Carly Bible one. So when I was looking at the swatches from Pat McGrath, this shade itself didn't look to me like it was one of the ones that was super like shiny, but I do think, at least in color, I think that the color is going to really match this color from the ABH and Carly Bible palette. So that color to me is a very pretty color. I do really like it, and I do feel like the only palette that I really have a very similar tone to this one is in the ABH. I have seen other colors like this color, but they lean a lot more pink and less open. And I have to say, the next few colors, I'm kind of digging. I really am. So the next one I actually found inside of the Huda Beauty Mauve Obsessions, and I looked for this color in multiple palettes. I wanted to find it in Lila so bad, and I couldn't, but I feel like I could have made it in Lila, but it wasn't worth it. I picked up this palette because this tone right here on the top is a deep mauve that just reminds me so much of this color. And when I swatched it and I looked at the swatches from Pat McGrath, I was like, wow, this is a very similar tone. Like, I feel like they are going to be almost identical, and this is the deepening shade I kind of used on the outer edge here, but I kind of smeared it out a lot. This tone is a very good mimic for the color that's inside of the new Pat McGrath. So the first two tones are actually very pretty together, so I'm liking the color story that I feel like they're working good. I mean, it's only two tones, but sometimes they like to throw in things there that you're like, why? So the next color, I actually jumped into the new nude because I do remember that there was a lot of like more tannish looking colors in here. And the one that I ended up going with was this color called Teddy. Now, when I swatched Teddy, I do feel at the end of the day, it might go a little warmer than the one that might be coming inside of the new Divine Rose 2. But when I swatched it with the rest of the colors, it reminded me a lot of her swatches. So if this one is a little bit warmer, it may be, but at the same time, this is one of those colors, blending shade. I feel like the difference between the two might not be like so off. I do feel like this is a very similar tone to what she's using inside the Divine Rose 2. It might have a little bit more yellow orange to it, and this one might go a little bit more rosy, but since this is a Divine Rose palette, I went with that color, and we'll see. I'm not 100% sure, but I do think at least the color story is starting to look really pretty. So far, I'm liking the color story. I like the mattes that are present here right now. I really like that deepening shade. It's very dark. And I also like that base shade because it's a nice base shade that's gonna add color to the lid. It will show up, but at the same time, it's a really pretty color to work with burgundies with. So far, I like. Now if we go on, the next color, when I was looking in the new nude, I was like, wait a minute, this color here called Charmed, even though in this pan it's very hard to tell, but when you do swatch it, it comes off as this kind of like copper, but yet rose copper look. I don't know what the color would be called, but it's like a rosy copper. And it's such a beautiful color. And I had actually just swatched it a few days ago because I actually wanted to use it, and it's kind of what reminded me of this tone. And I said, oh my goodness, that looks a lot like that color in the Divine Rose. And when I swatched them up together and looked at the swatches from Pat McGrath, I was like, ooh, this looks really close. I will say the Pat McGrath formula is a lot stronger and a lot oomph on the lid. So even though the Huda Beauty one is very good, this is a very good. Like, I swatched this thing and I was like, you know, but Pat McGrath's, I mean, it is an amazing formula. So, I mean, I feel like I have this color This is a beautiful color. Okay, so the next one, I actually went into the Lila palette thinking that this color may be something similar to this color down here called Halo, which is kind of like a pinky, but it also has a little gray in it, so it's not like very, very, very strong pink. So it's a very pretty, more like a dusty pink, but it's very soft and it's not very, very pink. If you look at the texture though in the Pat McGrath one, like you can already tell that that's gonna be one of those really pretty, like amazing shades. I did use a Pat McGrath all over my lid today. Will say that the formula of the Lila in this color, I probably would prefer it in the Pat McGrath version because I do know how her formula is. So 4 tones that I got up here are beautiful, neutral, very rosy, very wearable for myself, very gorgeous colors, like very pretty colors. So right now, well, the first 5, not 4, the first 5 are very wearable, very beautiful, very everything for myself. I'm really liking it. I mean, I'm digging the first 5 shades. It's not anything out of this universe, but it is very pretty. Okay, so the next one is, I mean, she didn't really need to add this color to be, for me, I don't really think she needed this color, but this is like that pop. It does go with the color sequence, so I guess that's why, but I found it in this magenta color inside of Lila. It is a very metallic-y, hot pink kind of color. I've seen this going around for a while already. I'm actually tired of this color. It actually is the color in this palette that kind of made me go like, oh, I don't know if I want it, because I don't really like those metallic pinky tones. They're very fun to do a cool creative eye look with, but I have a few palettes that already have that color. So I would have really wanted this to be something a little bit more unique than this metallic-y pink. So right now this color kind of made it go down for me. I almost feel like the Divine Rose, the original one, had a cooler color sequence now. You know what I mean? Because this color just kind of like broke it up for me. They had to put like the one color I've been saying I'm tired of seeing, you know? So then the next color, I was going into a few different palettes, but I ended up going back into the Mothership, the Bronze Seduction, and I couldn't get over the fact that this color right here, this bronze tone, which actually in this palette is called Bronze Blaze. Bronze Blaze, man, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, they're supposed to be different. They are supposed to be different. But when you swatch Bronze Blaze, it gives off a little rosy hint. So it's like this copper, but it gives a rosy hint to it. So it really reminds me a lot of this palette. And the cool thing about this one is it's the same formula. So I'm almost thinking like, this color could be almost the same, and I kind of own it in Pat McGrath already. Okay, so now the next one. So the next one I know is supposed to have this really unique shift. So what I ended up doing was saying, let me stick to Bronze Seduction. I jumped into this beautiful pink, because this pink right here is called rose gold pink or something like that. It has a similar tone to what I'm seeing in the Pat McGrath. But what I did was add a little bit of Astral Luna on top, because this color here shifts like green, but it's only like glitter. So if I got this pinky shade and I put the pink shade down, and then I got the Astral Luna and just dabbed it on top, I literally got a pink shade that shifted green. So that's kind of like what I was reading and looking and seeing that this very unique shade is supposed to do. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. But at the same time, I mean, I was able to create something kind of similar. The next one, I was like, okay, I've seen this color. I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it. Remember it from Natasha Denona's Gold palette. This beautiful set color right here in the center is this amazing gold. And I think I used this same color for the Star Wars collection that Pat McGrath came out with, and it reminded me of this color. So if you guys have that one, you might want to compare it. But look how pretty that color is, and it really reminds me a lot of the color that she's using inside of this new Divine Rose too. So then the last one, what I ended up doing was sticking inside of my gold palette. There's this really cool color up here on the top called Sparks. And it's right here, and it's almost like, it looks white in here, but it's not white. It's like gold glittery kind of amazingness, and it reminds me a lot of the color that's inside of the Pat McGrath, because it's so light and so faded, but it has all these beautiful glitter particles that shift gold. It reminds me of what I'm seeing inside of the Pat McGrath. So that's what I ended up getting, and this is the entire palette, and that's how I was able to create this palette and be able to see the color story. So now that I have the color story swatched on my arm, I'm gonna tell you, this is very hard because this is a very pretty palette. There's parts of it that I'm like head over heels about, and especially knowing Pat McGrath's formula and knowing that some of these metallics are going to be like so extravagant and gorgeous. So like out of the 10, I really love maybe 5 or 6. And then some of the other ones I'm like really the really beautiful gold that I got from Natasha Denona. I never ever use that color in Natasha Denona's palette. It's very pretty, it's just I hardly ever use it. The magenta color, which is also the in your face like amazing color in this palette, is also a color I hardly ever grab. The one that's gonna shift, green, I honestly don't love colors that shift, even though it's a cool idea. I just hate it when they have like that shifting because I don't know, because I'm just weird. I just like it to shift like the same color. But there's some colors in here that I'm like, And then there's also the little detail that this is a limited edition palette. At least that's what she's saying right now. So what does that mean? That means that after this is sold out, she's not coming out with it again. So for me, being a YouTuber, I like to buy things that are not limited edition, because then after a certain time, I can't use that palette anymore because people can't purchase it anymore. They get like frustrated, like, oh, what are you using on my eyes? Oh, sorry, you can't get it no more. So I almost feel like the palette I should have gotten was the Divine Rose, not the Divine Rose 2. So I'm going to make up my mind as of right now and just say that this is very hard because I really want this palette, but I'm going to say that I shouldn't purchase it because the one I probably should have purchased was the Divine Rose. So what I would tell you guys at home would be is if you own the Divine Rose, really look at this palette strongly and see how different it is from the Divine Rose, and if the tones that are different are ones that you actually like to use, because that's going to be a huge deciding factor. Because like for example, the magenta in here and the gold in here are those tones, and they're not tones that I personally like to use that much. So, you know, and some of the other colors remind me a lot of what I've seen from the Divine Rose, the original one, maybe a little bit more muted down, but it's what I remember from the Divine Rose, and I really liked the Divine Rose. So that's where I'm standing right now. So let me know down below if you own the Divine Rose. Are you still considering buying the Divine Rose 2, or do you think they're too similar? Give me your comments. I'm dying to see what you guys think. But anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next week's Make Up Your Mind, I will see and talk to you guys later.